Hello, and welcome to the show. My name is Bret. I'm live here every Thursday for years and years now, and we talk about DevOps, containers, CNCF, Kubernetes, Docker, all the things that are trendy and buzzworthy today. So normally we have guests, like today. I'm excited, and I have a few announcements, like usual. First, thank you so much to you patrons for being a member, whether you're a patron on patreon.com, that's over here, or you are a server booster in our Discord server, which I'll talk about in a second, or maybe you're a new member of the YouTube channel you're watching right now. We've got actually, I think it's our first member. Asim is, I'm not sure if they're actually live here, but they this morning became a YouTube member. Thank you so much. All the high fiver groups get together. So whether your high fiving membership is over here, that's what I call it, the high fiver club. Over on Patreon, we show up once a month in Discord server, and we kind of just have a coffee chat. It's all DevOps professionals just talking about what they're working on, engineering challenges, how we all keep up with this stuff. It's just a great, wonderful group of people. And I got to meet some of them at KubeCon, which we just got back from KubeCon. We took a couple of pictures with the crew, all the people that are basically creating this little wonderful DevOps community that we have built over on Discord. So if you don't know about that, the link's right above me, devops.fan. It's totally free. We just passed 12,000 people on that server, so that's wonderful. And we got to see some people speaking at KubeCon from the group, so it's just really exciting to see this community grow and everyone having fun and learning the world of DevOps and containers. Also, you probably have heard, if you've been around here, there's swag everywhere. We got the store stuff below. It's in the chat. It's on my screen. You can come and check out some of our designs from multiple friends that are designers. One of my favorites that I wore to KubeCon is Foxy. She shows up in some of my videos and some of my courses over on Udemy. And I was walking around with a sweatshirt, and multiple people actually found me and said, "Hey, I took that course. I know that animal." So it was very exciting to meet everyone at KubeCon, and I'm happy that you found me because I always want to meet people in the community. So that was great. On the show today, let's just get to it because enough about all this other stuff. All the way from the other side of the pond, we have Anaïs from Aqua Security. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And I'm just realizing, actually, we're a little zoomed in. I'm going to zoom out with the magic of the internet.
Make my head smaller. Yes. Great.
So that we're approximately the same size.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. Those of you watching, if you watch a lot of YouTube videos, you've probably seen Anaïs's videos. She has her own channel, actually, by the way, over here.
Yes.
Look at that.
That's my YouTube channel.
Yeah, so go check that out. The links are below. You showed up a couple of years ago, and your videos were fantastic. I love them.
2 years ago, I had my 2-year anniversary in the cloud native space.
Nice.
And I started 2 years ago, well, nearly 2 years ago, December, with my YouTube channel. Yeah. It has been a while now. It's exciting.
2 years. Like, if you could make it 2 years on YouTube.
Videos. Right. Yeah. I reached 100 videos.
That's a really nice number, too.
Yeah, that's amazing milestone. Yeah.
And all we can think about is how we have to get back into it. Like, we got to get back there. 100 videos, I need 100 more. That is the YouTube game.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the show today. We've been planning this for a while, actually for many months, and we both had to find the free time to make it happen. But we're both learning and sharing our Kubernetes journey, our container journey together, and that's what I think is interesting about some of your content is that you're learning it. It's almost like we're learning it with you, and it's kind of fun that way. It's like, oh, look at this, I can check this out, kind of stuff. So I appreciate that point of view because when you already know something so well, it's sometimes hard to pretend you're a new person and figure that out. So and you got some fans in chat there. Everybody's waving. Oh, we got Daniel back on the show. Amazing. What's up, Daniel?
Hello.
Sterling is here again. We got some regulars. Nice. So we didn't get to see each other at KubeCon, but maybe next year. Maybe next year's the year that we will meet.
Hopefully next year. Yeah. Yeah. Next year my puppy is going to be big enough so I can go.
If you haven't followed her on Twitter, she's got a new puppy. I've got a 3-year-old that's about to hit 3-year-old puppy. She's got a younger puppy, and we were before the show talking about puppy training and all their weird habits. So follow us on the other socials for all the puppy pics. Mine has its own Instagram, so
mine too.
As you do, right?
What's its name?
It's VB Finn, VB_Finn.
What's yours? It's Katie's Adventures.
Katie's Adventures. All right. Katie's Very nice. So yeah, we besides dog pics and talking about conferences, Anaïs has Aqua Security has a bunch of open source security tools, and we've talked about them for years on this show, but I don't think I've ever had, maybe once, we've had a dedicated Aqua Security show to talk about a lot of the open source you create. But I thought it was great that we have it again because there's so much stuff happening. You all are adding new features at a fairly rapid pace. So let's jump in.
Awesome.
So first off, what is Aqua Security? Like what do I go to Aqua Security for?
So Aqua Security itself has two main sections, the enterprise part and then the open source part. And the enterprise part is pretty much focused on providing securing the supply chain. I know you've talked in the previous live stream that you had with ChainGuard, you talked a lot about software supply chain and how to secure it and different aspects to it. Well, this is an enterprise tool that helps organizations do that at scale in an automated way with lots of integrations, which is amazing. However, it might not be the best thing for everybody, especially individual contributors, other open source engineers. So that's one of the reasons why we have an extensive list of open source projects, the main one being Trivy. And these open source projects, they are there for a different set of users, but also they drive innovation at Aqua. So a lot of the things that are happening within Aqua feed back into the open source projects, but also the open source projects are integrated into the enterprise projects. So it's not like what you see in other companies where you have open source and then the enterprise is plus other features. It's more like that Trivy is integrated in a different way in the enterprise part. So it's not just Trivy plus something else, but it's just under the hood using Trivy, for example. And then same with the other projects. Oh, I see the comment. Hi there.
Hello, James.
Thank you so much.
James is also
it's really great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the one that people know the most about in the open source list of products is Trivy, which I found, I don't know if it was early on in the project, but I found early on because it had the most comprehensive vulnerability scanning results. Back when, this was years ago, but back when it wasn't always, not all the scanners were properly scanning Alpine vulnerabilities in the Alpine distribution. And it basically, if a scanner can't find all the stuff in distribution, it just shows nothing. It says, I didn't find anything, which makes you think that everything's secure. And then Trivy, I would scan with Trivy, and suddenly it shows me all these vulnerabilities in my Alpine release. And I realized, oh, my other scanners aren't working. So we started using Trivy in that project. It was with a client of mine, and we switched all of our scanners out for Trivy, which is entirely open source scanning. And I've stuck with that in all my projects, all my demos ever since. And
amazing.
It's only gotten better. So for those of you who have not tried out Trivy, we're not going to actually do a demo today, but we are going to talk about some specific changes and new features that you maybe didn't know about if you're someone who's maybe tried Trivy before, maybe a couple years ago, and you didn't realize it's got all this new stuff. So let's just talk about the basics real quick.
So Trivy itself
what is Trivy?
started off it started off as a vulnerability scanner. So probably when you first started using Trivy, you thought it was really focused on vulnerabilities, and that's one of the main aspects that it still does, vulnerability scanning. So whatever resource you're scanning, it can show you then what kind of vulnerabilities, for example, your packages that you include in your project have. So you can scan your file systems, you can scan your container images for vulnerabilities, you can scan Git repositories, lots of different scan targets for vulnerabilities. But that's right now, or by now, just one of the features that Trivy has. The other main part is misconfiguration scanning. So that was actually the next part that was added to Trivy. And Trivy is using another project called devsec under the hood for example, specifically Terraform misconfiguration scanning. And misconfiguration scan tells you when you package up your resources into infrastructure as code configurations. Any form of configurations could be Kubernetes manifest, it could be Terraform, it could be something else, it could be the Docker file itself. Anything that's configuring your application, then it can show you if something is not configured in the best way, in the most optimized, most secure way. So these are like the two main components to Trivy. And now we have been, like, throughout the past year particularly, we have been adding more and more features around that to make the scanning more comprehensive and allow you for scanning in different environments, such as to scan directly the running resources in your Kubernetes cluster, or to also generate SBOMs and other resources of your resources. So there's lots of different components, lots of different moving parts. And it's a lot of times when people get started with Trivy, it's a little bit difficult to really identify those different parts that are feeding into Trivy, and make Trivy this all-in-one security scanner, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the way that I think most of us understand Trivy is this CVE scanner, which for those that haven't seen one of my 100 shows that I probably mentioned Trivy in, I use it a lot in GitHub Actions. So I always want Trivy to scan my images right after I build them to make sure that my vulnerability set isn't increasing over time. So for those that you haven't watched, I have videos on this channel about GitHub Actions, and Trivy is one of those demos that I do. I have the samples all in that repo. If you just go to my GitHub and search for GitHub Actions, you can find all this stuff. And it generates, like we're kind of seeing here, this is actually for the infrastructure as code, but it looks very similar to this, right? And a lot of us are, if we haven't scanned our images before, we're usually kind of surprised and shocked at how much there is to begin with, like hundreds of vulnerabilities or potentially even thousands of vulnerabilities in your image if you haven't chosen a better secure image, which I ranted about for 30 minutes at DockerCon this year. But that's what Trivy's trying to do, right? It's trying to expose these things in my images. But now I have the ability to scan other things with it. So I need to go back to my GitHub Actions and add scanning the YAML. Is that what you're doing? Is just pointing it at a YAML set, a manifest or something?
So what you mentioned is the vulnerability scanning. You will have this table, and the table classifies the different vulnerabilities and like how severe are they. And then like when you have this list of, I don't know, 100, 200 vulnerabilities, the table or the classification and the additional information to those vulnerabilities will help you like filter them out and really like take care of the most important ones right away. Now, what you can do is with the misconfiguration scan. So before you even build the container image and scan then the container image, you could scan your Docker file for misconfiguration issues. So it, for example, will tell you if you don't have a user defined. That's what the misconfiguration scan does. It then has like not a table, but like a list of different things that you do wrong. And then you can build from the get-go a more secure image that is not necessarily like the vulnerability scan checks the packages and all of the resources that go into the image, but it doesn't check how the image is built. Like if it is built, if the build process is the best.
Right. No, well, and that's one of the challenges is for a lot of people is they don't know where a lot of these tools belong in their workflows. They're always confused by, do I wait till it, do I do this on my server? Do I do this on my local machine? Do I do it in Jenkins or whatever I have as my CI solution? And it sounds like this is starting to be a tool that I'm going to be running 2 or 3 times throughout my tool chain. Yeah, because you're right. Like if I have a misconfiguration in my Docker file, why bother wasting resources to build the image if I already know that the Docker file is probably going to get me in trouble, right? So I think the same, as we normally say in the security space for a lot of these things, you turn it in audit mode first so that you don't hurt your team's workflow by blocking everything. But eventually, as you get more mature, you should enable it to basically exit 1 or exit other than 0 so that your CI will actually stop and say, you can't go forward because you have a misconfiguration or you have a critical vulnerability and we don't allow any critical vulnerabilities. I'm the one that ends up implementing this for teams, and a lot of times I'm very nervous about breaking their workflows or preventing work from getting done, and I don't want to upset the apple cart too much, right? So I don't know if you ever see stories of that, but
yeah, it's a fine line between like integrating security scanning and blocking people or disrupting their existing processes, right? Kind of the reluctance to having that change, and then also the frustration of having yet another thing to take care of, right? And that's why I think it's so important to really use Trivy at different stages, because not every stage will capture everything. That's one part, and then also it will allow you to take care of different resources along the way. So it's not like once, like at the end when you've built everything, that's when you check your resources for security issues, and that's when you bombard it with this long list, and that's obviously then overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of decided this year that anything more than 20 in my vulnerability list, and I table flip. I table flip because humans can't really comprehend what the real risk is. When you start talking about dozens or hundreds of vulnerabilities in your images, particularly when we talk about just high and critical, it's too much work. It's it's insanity to think that you're going to spend 6 months going to try to cut down all these vulnerabilities and trace them. Let's just say I have not seen a client or customer of mine yet who's willing to do that level of work. So we usually at that point have to go back and say, okay, let's look at our base image. Like this maybe is just all coming from our base image, and let's just go look at that. And that's when people learn about Slim images and Alpine and the new Wolfie that I'm talking about that we talked about the other week on ChainGuard. Yeah, these base images, whether it's distroless or whatever, that get us out of trouble to begin with, so that our application. We can control our application dependencies, but a lot of time those base images, we can't do a lot about those vulnerabilities other than find a new base image.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So we have a question slightly related to Trivy in chat, which they were asking about the operator for Trivy, which I did not know about. Is there an operator?
Yeah. So the thing is, Trivy has been adopting more and more features for the cloud native environment to cater for cloud native projects. And one of them is that Trivy allows you to scan your running resources as well inside of your cluster through the CLI. But that's really ad hoc scanning, right? Like you have to run the scan inside of your terminal to get the output and then do something with it. You can't really get on a continuous basis reports, and you can't really get an overview of the state of your running resources over time. That doesn't work with the CLI out of the box. So the Trivy operator is a Kubernetes operator, and what a Kubernetes operator does, it has usually one main job, and then has to also run continuous scans to perform that job. So operators usually scan either particular resources or some kind of resources in your cluster on a continuous basis. And then if their job is triggered, they run their job, they do that particular task, and then they wait until it's triggered again. So in the case of the Trivy operator, for vulnerability scans, for instance, it will check all of your container images within your cluster and scan all of your running container images within your cluster for vulnerabilities. Now, if any of those container images changes, if the tag changes, it will rerun the scan on that new container image, on that new tag. Or if there's a new deployment, a new container image spun up and running inside of your cluster, then it will also automatically run a scan. So the operator is ultimately listening, or like looking for any new container images, any new running workloads within the cluster that it can scan for vulnerabilities. And the same is done for other security scans from within your cluster. So for example, in Kubernetes, it's quite easy to maybe have, semi-easy to have exposed secrets that are related to some application. And sometimes it's very difficult to identify those. Now, Trivy, the CLI, can tell you if you have any exposed secrets. It will also tell you that whenever you run any security scan with Trivy, with the CLI, but the operator, in addition, does it on a continuous basis from within your cluster. So for example, if somebody is doing manual changes within your cluster and needs to supply a secret to your cluster, if they're in a hurry, they might not take particular care of how they pack up that secret, and it might get exposed. Now, then the operator could tell you that within a scan. So that would be, for example, one use case. But there are several different scans that the operator does, and it's there to make your life easier ultimately. To run all those scans on a continuous basis, and then you can feed it into other tools, the results.
Yeah, that's a challenge too, because we don't want to upset the existing workflow. In fact, Nicholas in chat said that this is actually, I think, a nice approach, is that for vulnerabilities or issues, whether it's Kubernetes issues, image issues, that basically to grandfather in or grant permission for the old CVEs you found, and to not try to block on those, but any new ones, and separating out tech debt from new problems. That's actually a really nice approach. I like that approach, because I do the same thing with linting. I implement linters for teams, and it always upsets their apple cart and workflow, because if you have an existing project that you've never linted, just like an image that you've never scanned, you're going to get a ton of feedback, and who's got time for all that right now, right? Like we all got to ship features, get work done, and we have to reduce toil, but also we have to keep pushing the stuff. So I recognize that that's a common thing for most teams. They're very nervous about implementing these tools because they're afraid that everyone will just hate them because they're going to blame the person for the tool's opinion around something. So that's a great tip. Thanks, Nicholas. Do you happen to know who Nicholas is? Is that like a coworker or
If
someone new?
none,
No.
if you
Sometimes
see the
people
photo,
have.
maybe.
Sometimes friends.
I don't
People
see
have
any
friends
photo.
show up. Sometimes people have friends come in and like teammates and stuff, and they're like answering all the questions in chat and killing it. And I'm thinking,
You're
oh
putting
man,
me on the spot here. What if it's a friend and they don't know?
oh no, I'm so sorry.
No.
We met at the Acuity
Oh,
booth. Oh, nice. Yes. Okay. Perfect.
that's
I
not
don't
me.
know.
That's you.
That's me. Sorry, Nicholas.
I wasn't there.
Well, glad to have you on the
You
show.
have to meet again.
Yeah, we're gonna have to meet one more time in the real world, and then it'll sink in. Yeah, KubeCon. What are we? We're gonna be in Copenhagen.
I think
Not
I
Copenhagen,
messaged with you. I messaged with Nicholas, I think, on Slack. I think about a project.
Nicholas is our newest developer advocate at Acuity. So we had Acuity on the show this summer.
Oh, nice.
And I met Daniel, and I evidently met Nicholas, and I forgot. So sorry. But thanks for being on the show. We were talking about like the challenge of now that Trivy can scan all this stuff. We don't want to do it manually, and and this is like one of the jobs of DevOps, right? Is we get a new tool, we learn about it, but it shouldn't be us running the tool. We should really automate it. So it's wonderful that this is an in-cluster feature, because then I don't have to go create a whole way for my Trivy scanner and GitHub Actions to talk to my clusters and how to do that securely, and have access to production. And that gets really, when you have CI that has access to production, you get a little nervous because there's a lot of potential for doing bad things there. But if you can do it in cluster and then have it just push out results, I really like that approach. That appeals to me in my security conscious DevOps approach, I guess. So, all right, so that's free too. Right, open source on the operator.
Yes. So that's.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. All good.
So we've got Trivy. We're going to put that in our CI. Like you can run it locally, but I would advise all teams, once you've gotten used to it, put it in your automation. Whatever your CI solution is, put it in there. Figure out, like, you could probably put it in there for scanning your YAML, scanning your Docker file, scanning your image once it's built. You could. Each one of those methods has different benefits, and then you mature. It's like you graduate, and you're like, I want this in my cluster, and I want to know the current state of my cluster. We talked a lot about drift on this show in the past, and how configuration drift can creep in your cluster without you knowing it. In fact, that's what Acuity and a lot of these other ones were doing at GitOps days, or GitOps Con. At KubeCon. We had a KubeCon.
GitOps days.
Yeah, GitOps.
No.
There's a GitOps days, I think, but this was GitOps Con, because there's all these
security.
Yeah.
No, don't ask me. But what you mentioned regarding using Trivy versus the operator, it's also like that Trivy obviously is more focused on like the pre-deployment part, and then once you have your running workloads, that's when you want to have the checks happening on a continuous basis. Like some applications might be running in the background for a long time, and there could be new vulnerabilities exposed, something like that. But what you also mentioned regarding the automation, like automation is great, but what I like to tell people is when you automate things, make sure that you also set up alerts, that you make your tools scream at you. Because the thing is, what you mentioned regarding security, right? When people have all those long vulnerability lists, or like those long lists of security issues, they get vulnerability fatigue. They don't want to look at them anymore, right? And it's easy for security tools or security alerts to just be ignored and to just look away, because my application, if it's still running, if people can still use it, if it has great uptime, great reliability, otherwise, right? Even if it's unsecure, who cares if they can still use it until it's too late, right? Until they have to care about the security, and you don't want to have your users to care about the security. So yeah.
Yeah, James is asking in chat a sort of a related question around, in your pipelines, what's the go, no-go criteria you've settled on when scanning? The approach I've taken with some of my consulting clients, and Anaïs, tell me if this is a sound plan, because I might be doing it wrong. But we do the auditing thing first, right? Audit only, and so it's reporting It's not alerting because we're gonna get failure. We're gonna get CVEs showing up in every scan at first because we haven't scanned before, and our image is probably full of them. And then we will take an approach where either it depends on the team. Honestly, I've had teams where the only motivator is blocking CI. So it's not a great approach. I don't like doing that approach at first because you're just going to make some people upset. But sometimes I will work with teams where the ops team is mandated to implement 0 critical CVEs in production policies, but the dev team doesn't work for them, and the dev team has deadlines and they're focused on other things, and so there may be not a fully DevOps SRE modern team structure. So we end up the ops team basically has to say, on this day, our scans, if we scan any critical vulnerabilities, we will prevent the image from going to production. It's a very hard approach to take, but sometimes that's necessary. I much rather work with the devs. We reduce the critical and high vulnerability debt, and then we turn it on for any new stuff. I don't know what you've seen with your all's customers, but how does that? Is that similar to anything you all are approaching with your recommendations?
I mean, that's one of them, and that you can easily, also configure through Trivy. And then again, what you mentioned, it really depends on the team. Like, how does your team work? Where are they most reactive, right? Some people might be most reactive when they get alerts in a Slack channel, or once the deployment is actually running, or it also depends on who's responsible for which part of the application stack, right? Like if you're responsible for containerizing your application that you built, like your services, or if that's somebody else who's then like packaging up your application. Like, should developers write the manifest, the configurations, or are they not responsible for that? And then depending on that, I guess, where is the block most effective? Right. What else have I seen? That's a good question.
all the different ways, probably, yeah. Well, and
there's not one way, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. And it's culture.
Think of one way.
It's very much a culture thing too. Yeah, if your team is pretty savvy on the modern, like, does your team know what CVEs are? Have they ever run a scanner before? Because a lot of times I'll work with teams, and once the vulnerability happens, let's say I will fail the builds or the CI pipelines or the deployment pipelines, whatever, if I get only criticals. Like, I won't, at first, maybe I don't care about highs, mediums, and lows. Most of the teams I work with, they settle into blocking on highs and criticals, and then the rest they report on, but they don't block on, because sometimes there's just so many. But when we start, like, we'll tiptoe in and say only criticals. But a lot of times what will happen is it's the developers that have to fix it, because it's a dev dependency. It's a database driver or some JavaScript library. So they have to fix it, but they may not really understand what they have to do to fix it. Like, they see this error and it says vulnerability, but they're like, how did it get there? Where do I go? How do I find what it is? And they're maybe not, if you're on a big enough project, they maybe don't even know what that app is, because they didn't add the module. They're just, it's a very big monolith, right? Imagine a big monolith with 100 dependencies. Yeah, so it just kind of depends. Yeah. I think it's very, very dependent. But tiptoe. That's my general recommendation. Tiptoe in slowly. Reporting, do it immediately. Like, report all the time. Always report. But eventually, you're right. People will ignore it. Sorry.
Yeah, just regarding the tiptoe part, that a lot of times when organizations are super motivated to change their entire workflow to make it more secure, focus on supply chain security best practices, and then they disrupt it so much that it's actually realized it was too much, and it doesn't work with how the team used to operate. So we have also companies who went for the Aqua Enterprise project and then realized it was too much. It was not what they were looking for, and then went to Trivy and integrated with Trivy. So start small and then expand from there. Start with your most critical parts of your application.
That is great advice. That's generally the advice that anyone on just doing any of this stuff should take, right? Yeah. Don't try to implement a 20 cluster Rancher super cluster with multi-cluster manager and all the things that it does before you've built and understood the single cluster, right? So, like, it's the it's the same thing where we all tend to want to sprint before we walk, and it's a problem, but start small.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we had this other tool I want to definitely get to. You said something
Let's see.
before the show. Before we get to the
Yeah.
to Tracee, you said before the show, I was talking about other tools you had, like Kube-Bench, Kube something, another
Kube-Hunter, Kube-Bench, and
Kube-Hunter.
Kube-Hunter. So yeah, so Kube-Bench is basically a CIS compliance scan. So CIS was one of the cluster compliance guidelines. So basically checks
Hmm.
is everything configured correctly. You have that's the main one, and then you have NSA compliance scans as well. Now Trivy does know NSA compliance scans as well, and the idea is basically that the other projects that used to be separate within the Aqua open source world, they are merging more into Trivy. So Trivy does know compliance scan as well, but Kube-Bench itself does still CIS scans, and it's used by several companies. It's just one of those features that's slowly integrating into Trivy as well. Now, Kube-Hunter is kind of pen testing for your cluster. You can run it on your cluster, and you can find issues within your cluster. I haven't actually run it actively, like to a great extent. I know what it does, but that's as far as it goes. I haven't had much of a need for it so far. Again, it's like usually larger corporations that run it or integrate with it as well.
Yeah, and is that also getting integrated to Trivy, or is that going to stay a standalone tool?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I think so far it's planned to be separate. There's also, it's really like catering to a niche, we realize it's really a niche of users that that are integrating with it. They are using it actively. So it definitely it is popular. It has been very popular for a long time, and people know it. But there's lots of discussions of like how should it evolve. So if you are Kube-Hunter user, then let us know what you would like to see. It's all open source. You can participate in the conversations. We also have a Slack channel if you have any questions and if you want to get involved or if you have any thoughts on it. But yeah, it's a very specific tool.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, and it sounds also. It sounds like it's not a tool for someone like if you're just now learning Trivy, you probably should hold off a little bit on Kube-Hunter because you probably need to implement this comes at it from a different angle, right? Because this isn't really about things inside my container. This is more about the cluster itself and maybe what I'm exposing and not exposing. Is that?
Yeah, so that's really the running resources within and any security issues they might be exposing.
Yeah, I can see here like some of the things like accessing the Kubernetes API server, accessing the kubelet API, some of the things that are not related to our containers. So this is probably, if you have a security team, this is the kind of tool that I feel like the security team is very interested in running, and then they'll let you know the results of the scan they found on your cluster or something like that. So very cool. So let's jump over. There's my jets again. Yay, jets. Let's jump over and talk about Tracee, because I was able to learn a little bit about this at KubeCon, but I don't know everything about it. So where did I hit this tab?
Where's Tracee?
There we go.
Tracee has been described as the little sister of Trivy that has been in marketing for a long time, but it actually has very little to do with Trivy. So I wouldn't necessarily call it I'm not too fond of that saying, if you know Tracee or if you've heard that before. But yeah, Tracee is ultimately a runtime forensics tool. It basically, what does that mean? It uses eBPF, which is this cool new technology that basically allows you to access events like on the kernel level of your nodes, of your machines. So what what Tracee used to do, and that's kind of like what it does, is it runs on your nodes. It could be like a virtual machine. It could be your own machine. It could be your Kubernetes cluster node. And then it runs basically on every node, and then it listens for any events that are any system calls on the kernel level and reports on those. Now that's like the first part. And then the second part is that it has a set of rules, Tracee rules, that are just set. You wouldn't really modify them. You just run them as part of Tracee. And those rules are based on the research that's done within Aqua, on what kind of security issues are commonly observed on the node level that users might want to be aware of. And then you basically have all of these events being outputted by Tracee of things that happen actually on a node level. Like usually what happens on a node level, you wouldn't really know. It's like kind of, if you think about it, you have like you have your node, you have your application running within your Kubernetes cluster, right? And you might see the events from that, from the pods that are running the application, but you might not necessarily on the logs, but you might not necessarily see how does it interact with the node, or what is the communication with other with other parts of the application of your services. And Tracee is really just, the main functionality is really expose all of the events that are happening on your node level. And then in addition, you can add the Tracee rules, which is filtering those events, because obviously you have like this stream of events. Yeah. And that's my dog agreeing.
Hi, puppy. Yeah, and what's most interesting about this kind of tool is the rule set, I think, because a lot of us are like the mere mortals of the container world. We don't know what we need to track, right? We don't know what we need to look for. And I noticed that I was talking at your booth actually at KubeCon about the default rule set, and so I was just pulling that up because you can turn on and off these rules, I think, like you were talking about. And
you can, but you wouldn't actually necessarily do it. That's something else that I personally want to change about the user experience. So you wouldn't necessarily turn them off and on. You would run them either out of the box, or you would define your own rules. And that's what a lot of companies do that use like projects like Tracee or Falco by Sysdig as like a similar project. So usually companies just want to get all of the events from the node level and then apply filters. Now, these out-of-the-box filters that are created by the security team at Aqua. And that's one of the benefits, that if you are choosing any security scanner, make sure you know like who's working on a security scanner and what kind of information it's using. For example, Trivy is using information from the security research team at Aqua, and similarly, Tracee is doing that as well. And that's what those signatures are based on. Like if there's a noisy signature that you don't care about, that's just throwing continuous like streams of information at you that you don't necessarily want to know, then you can obviously turn the signature off. Then that's advisable. Like, okay, turn it off. Like if that's something that is just creating noise, then then don't care about it.
Yeah, and that's generally the problem with all of our security tools, is that the tuning, so that, like you said, alert fatigue doesn't set in and we start ignoring all the things we implemented to warn us about stuff like this. And that's why I think sometimes, I mean, we can't say it enough, start slow, start one tool at a time, and get that tool to a point where it's only alerting on the really bad stuff, so that you can at least manage your work. Because if you're ignoring the alerts, the tool's not doing any good, and you should just, you might as well just get rid of it if you're not looking at the alerts.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And I love that this is open source, because we had Liz Rice recently on the show from Isovalent talking about
really?
eBPF. I know nothing about eBPF. I'm not a kernel developer, and she helped explain a little bit about eBPF. So if you are all watching and listening and you're like, this sounds interesting, but I have no idea what that BPF thing is, scroll back in this channel a few times to find the Liz Rice eBPF episode. She actually is writing or is still writing a book, I think it's not out yet, on eBPF that you can get like a free excerpt from actually as well. By the way, I wanted to mention from you earlier, you were talking about the Trivy operator, and someone in chat said, you have a video on this.
Yes, I have lots of videos on it. Specifically different components, like different Kubernetes components. So here, for example, Trivy operator and versus to CLI. But also on my channel, you can find like a specific video just on operators, explaining what do operators do in your cluster. And I love to draw things. So you see me live drawing things.
Very nice. Yeah, so those are, I'm going to put that link in chat for people so they can find that video.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just scrolling through your videos trying to find what they were talking about, and there it is. Very cool. So I guess, would your recommendation be for people to start with Trivy, and like what do you think like is the order of, if I'm going to implement all these tools and what's the roadmap look like for people?
Yeah, so I would suggest you start with Trivy, start with the CLI, get used to it, play around locally. You can do lots and lots of filtering of your different security issues, of the different scans from the Trivy CLI. It's a really powerful CLI. It has, but the thing is, while it has like a standard of like how each command is run across its different features, it has an onboarding curve. So once you get used to it, it enables to run a lot of different scans. And once you're comfortable with the CLI and you kind of know how to filter for different vulnerabilities, we also have some tutorials on the Aqua open source YouTube channel. It's like if you look Aqua open source, you will find it. Then you can get started integrating Trivy in your workflow. For example, in your GitHub Actions, we have some examples in the documentation for different CI/CD pipelines, and do continuous scanning from within your delivery pipelines. And if you're using Kubernetes, that's when I would get started with the operator, then play around with the operator. Now, it also depends what kind of other applications you're using. For example, if you're using VS Code, you can use the VS Code extension. If you're using Vim, you can use the Vim extension for Trivy, and you can do also continuous scanning on your resource while you write them with Trivy, with the integrations. So check out the integration sections as well. Play around with those. If you're using Docker Desktop, we have a Docker Desktop extension as well that does the vulnerability scanning for you. Now, once you're comfortable with all of that, then you can dive into like the, I guess, more niche features of Trivy. For example, Trivy can generate SBOMs and do lots of things with those SBOMs. So an SBOM is basically an inventory list of everything that's, for example, in your container image. Like it details all of the different packages that are used within the container image. That's one of the features, but Trivy has also, we are integrating cloud scanning, so you can scan also all the services in your AWS account. So again, it's a very versatile tool, and really depends what are you using already, right? And then what's useful to you, what benefits you the most.
Yeah, it feels like almost it's becoming sort of a Swiss Army knife a little bit of scanning all the things and that's the trick too, is because we've got so many tools in our pipelines already. It's almost like we have that Linux mindset, the Unix sort of motto of small tools doing one thing well, and the challenge with that is that our software lifecycle has gotten so complicated with all the things we have to do to keep it safe and secure that we don't maybe need 20 tools in our pipeline before things go from commit to production. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and I have people on this show all the time that are just another tool, another idea, scanning your YAML with this tool, scanning your clusters with that tool, scanning your images with this tool, setting up. It's a lot. So I really appreciate sometimes when tools like this take a different approach, and they say, hey, look, we're not going to make yet another tool. It's just going to be an option.
It's all on.
Yeah, it's very much the Docker way, right? I think they call it batteries included but swappable. And I feel like that's kind of what Trivy's doing a little bit, where you don't have to use all these other features. You could use it just for the YAML scanning or the image scanning, but it has an increasing amount of these tools built in. So you don't have to go learn another project. You can just keep using the one you know.
That's cool. The thing. For example, regarding like if you're using Terraform, it's using TFSec under the hood to do Terraform misconfiguration scans. Now you could use that project separately as well. You don't have to use Trivy for your Terraform scans, but the thing is, Trivy wraps it up in the standardized CLI, and that makes it possible to do all those different scans through the same kind of process without having to get used to like onboard it to yet another tool.
Yeah,
it's kind of the benefits of it.
And I'm also glad you mentioned the Docker Desktop extension, because for those of us that are using Docker Desktop, I'm a fan. The extension marketplace is like the feature of 2022. It's the thing we've been talking about all year long. And the ability for you to just go in that extension store, find Trivy, click install. And it gives you a GUI. It gives you a nice little GUI right inside there, and it gives you nice, pretty colors for the sets of vulnerabilities. So if you're not someone who's 100% shell all the time, I know you people. I am one of you people at times, but I also sometimes just want a GUI. I don't want to have to remember the command line tool that I don't remember all the options for, right? So the GUI is there now. Docker Desktop is the gateway to that. The extensions, we've been talking about them all year, so it's really exciting that you all have that in there, because I do want people to know about these tools, and I know that not everyone in the world watches this show. So the more ways we can slide these security tools like gently into people's workflows, the better, I think. Yeah,
totally. You don't have to be a security professional to use security scanners. That's the main. I think that's the main takeaway of like everybody could use Trivy. It's like a tool for everyone. Everybody who's dealing with development resources.
Yeah, that's the soundbite we'll be putting in the social message for this podcast. By the way, if you didn't know, this will be a podcast in like 6 or 8 weeks, and so you can get the link for that below. We basically take out the demos. We didn't really have any demos today, but so this will be a podcast episode on audio only format that you can watch, and it'll take out all my ums and all the things that I stutter on, and so you can watch a shorter version of this with Anaïs. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We've covered a lot. We could probably talk about 2 more hours on this stuff, but we all have more work to do. So thanks so much for being on the show. People should check out your channel listed below. Check out the Aqua Security channel on YouTube listed here. Your Twitter handle. You're on Twitter like me regularly every day, just about. Our Twitter handles are below us, so reach out there if people have questions. Anything else I'm forgetting? Do you have a?
No, that's it.
All right.
Trivy is all of our projects are open source. You can contribute. Please do join our channel. Let us know what you think. Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and do you last question? When you do live streams, are you doing them on a regular basis? Should I tell people? Tell people no. Okay, it's just a surprise.
It's a spontaneous thing that I do.
Perfect. So you'll have to subscribe to her channel and click the bell in order to know.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to join one of my live streams. It's a very spontaneous thing for me.
Very cool. I'm glad you're doing it. We need more people live streaming their cloud native work, essentially. So,
awesome.
And I'm glad you're doing it here on YouTube. Awesome. All right, everyone. We'll be back next week. Who's going to be on the show next week? I already Oh.
You had one job.
I'm not prepared.
You're really prepared.
So November 16th. So what is that? 2 weeks from now, we're going to have the next High Fivers. So if you want to be in this small little community, click on the links above, the bretfisher.com or the devops.fan. Any of them will take you, and eventually you can get onto Patreon, which you can do below, or just join this channel on YouTube, and you'll be rushed right into the Discord server where you'll have exclusive access to those channels and that event. I don't know who's going to... Oh, you know what? We're going to have Infra HQ on the show next week. That's Matt Williams. Infra HQ, they are doing authorization to Kubernetes. So they're going to help you have like a single pane of authorization to all your clusters. And they also used to make a little tool called Infra, which, well, I think they still make it, but it was like Lens. Mm-hmm. It's a Kubernetes GUI that lets you do all this cool stuff and troubleshoot your Kubernetes cluster. So anyway, they're going to be on the show next week. Well, thanks again. It's great to meet you in the virtual. Hopefully we'll see each other at the next KubeCon. And we'll see everyone this exact time.
Everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We'll see you next week here on YouTube Live. Ciao.
Bye.